For nearly 20 years, Ellen DeGeneres occupied a rare position in American culture. She was not just a television host, but a symbol of kindness, generosity, and progress. Her daytime talk show reached millions every day. Her influence extended from Hollywood studios to living rooms across the country. Her brand was built on a simple, repeated message: be kind to one another. Then, in 2020, that image fractured. Investigative reporting revealed allegations of a toxic workplace culture behind the scenes of The Ellen DeGeneres Show. Former employees described fear, intimidation, and mistreatment that sharply contradicted the warmth Ellen projected on camera. What followed was not a sudden collapse, but a steady erosion of trust from audiences, from advertisers, and eventually from the industry itself. By 2022, one of the most successful talk shows in television history was over. This is the story of how Ellen DeGeneres rose, how cracks formed behind the scenes, how a public reckoning unfolded, and why the fallout permanently reshaped her legacy. Ellen DeGeneres' ascent to cultural dominance was neither quick nor guaranteed. She began performing stand-up comedy in the late 1970s, working club stages at a time when comedy was overwhelmingly male and often hostile to outsiders. Her humor relied less on aggression and more on observation, a style that gradually earned her recognition. By the early 1990s, Ellen transitioned to television with her sitcom Ellen. The show gained popularity for its relatability and humor, but its defining moment came in 1997, when Ellen publicly came out as gay, both personally and through her character. The moment was historic. It was also professionally devastating. Advertisers withdrew, network support weakened, ratings declined. Within a year, the show was cancelled. Ellen later described the period that followed as one of near-total professional exile. Offers disappeared, opportunities dried up. Hollywood, which had briefly embraced her bravery, moved on. What followed was a slow rebuild. Ellen returned to stand-up comedy, touring extensively, and reconnecting with live audiences. She found success voicing the character of Dory in Finding Nemo, which reintroduced her to mainstream audiences without placing her at the center of controversy. In 2003, she received a second major chance, this time in daytime television. The Ellen DeGeneres Show debuted with a tone that contrasted sharply with much of daytime programming. The show emphasized humor, positivity, emotional storytelling, and generosity. Ellen danced onto the stage. She connected with guests casually. Ordinary people were surprised with gifts, trips, and financial help. Audiences responded immediately. Ratings climbed. The show became a cultural staple. Ellen's brand evolved into something powerful and distinct. Optimism backed by authenticity. Over time, her influence expanded beyond daytime television into production deals, game shows, streaming projects, and brand partnerships. By the late 2000s, Ellen DeGeneres was no longer simply a host. She was a media institution, and publicly, that institution appeared flawless. Large television productions are complex ecosystems. Hundreds of employees operate behind the scenes to maintain a seamless, on-camera experience. As the Ellen DeGeneres Show grew, so did the layers between Ellen and her staff. According to later reporting, Ellen herself was not involved in most daily operations. Senior producers managed schedules, content, and staff. Communication flowed downward, not laterally. For years, concerns circulated quietly among employees. Former staff members later described long hours, rigid expectations, and an atmosphere where mistakes were not tolerated. Some claimed they felt disposable, easily replaced in a competitive industry. Others alleged inappropriate comments from management or retaliation after raising concerns. These accounts did not initially gain traction outside the workplace. Like many entertainment environments, internal dissatisfaction remained largely invisible to the public. What made the situation particularly volatile was the contrast between Ellen's public persona and the alleged internal culture. The show's brand was built on empathy and kindness. The workplace, according to former employees, did not always reflect those values. Still, without documentation or unified reporting, these stories remained fragmented. That changed in 2020. In July 2020, investigative journalists published a report detailing allegations from former employees of The Ellen DeGeneres Show. The report described a workplace culture that included intimidation, fear of retaliation, and inappropriate behavior by senior staff. Importantly, the allegations did not center on criminal conduct. Instead, they focused on management culture, how power was exercised, and how complaints were handled. The story spread rapidly. Additional reporting followed. More former employees came forward. Some described being fired after taking medical leave. Others alleged discriminatory remarks or unprofessional conduct by management. Ellen responded publicly, stating that she was heartbroken and unaware of the behavior being described. She emphasized that as the show grew, she became increasingly removed from daily operations. She promised accountability and change. Warner Brothers, the studio behind the show, launched an internal investigation. The investigation resulted in the departure of several longtime senior producers. Structural changes were announced. Ellen addressed her staff in a meeting, apologizing and taking responsibility as the show's leader. Yet the damage extended beyond internal corrections. Public trust began to erode. For many viewers, the revelations created cognitive dissonance. The brand that had promised kindness now faced credible accounts suggesting something very different behind the scenes. Whether Ellen was personally aware or not became secondary to the broader question of leadership accountability. The cultural narrative shifted. The fallout from the controversy unfolded gradually, rather than explosively. Ratings declined. Daytime television was already facing challenges due to changing media consumption habits. But the Ellen DeGeneres show experienced a noticeable drop. The energy of the show felt altered. Public enthusiasm waned. Advertisers paid attention. While the show did not lose all sponsorships, controversy introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is risk. Brands prefer stability, especially when alignment with values is central to their image. Ellen herself appeared more subdued on camera. She addressed the controversy in monologues, acknowledging the gap between intention and outcome. She stated that she had learned from the experience and committed to doing better, but apologies, once public trust is damaged, rarely restore it fully. In 2021, Ellen announced that the show would end after its 19th season. Officially, she cited creative reasons, stating that the show was no longer challenging for her. Unofficially, the timing was widely interpreted as a consequence of the controversy. The final episodes aired in 2022. There was no dramatic cancellation. No explosive ending, just a quiet conclusion to a show that had once defined daytime television. Ellen DeGeneres, once omnipresent, stepped largely out of the spotlight. The story of Ellen DeGeneres is not one of sudden villainy or simple hypocrisy. It is a story about scale, power, and accountability. Ellen's career was built on resilience. She survived professional exile, rebuilt her reputation, and reshaped daytime television. Her impact on representation and visibility remains significant. But her downfall illustrates a modern reality. Brand identity cannot substitute for organizational accountability. As the Ellen DeGeneres show expanded, Ellen's distance from daily operations grew. Systems formed beneath her authority. When those systems failed employees, responsibility ultimately traced upward, regardless of intent. The controversy also reflects a broader cultural shift. Employees now possess platforms. Audiences expect alignment between stated values and lived experience. Institutions are judged not just by what they project, but by how they operate internally. Ellen's legacy now exists in tension. She is remembered both as a pioneer who reshaped television and as a cautionary example of what happens when power goes unchecked within a carefully constructed brand. The collapse was not instant, it was structural, and once exposed, it could not be undone. That is why this story still matters. Not because of scandal, but because it reveals how easily public trust can fracture when image and reality diverge.